Hi, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nurzati Alia binti Muhammad Zaki and I am representing group number 6, which the topic is Industry of Building Materials and Metals. Before we get into it, I'd like to introduce my group members, Muhammad Ikmah Hakim bin Abdul Ghaffur, Muhammad Mukri bin Zakaria, Muhammad Aiman bin Azizur Rahman. Regarding the industrial products, we chose 8 companies which are Dynasiate Group Berhad, Jade Marvel Group Berhad, Ajia Berhad, AYS Ventures Berhad, Wesintech Berhad, BSL Corporation Berhad, ATTA Global Group Berhad, Mastil Malaysia Steelworks KL Berhad.
This is open high low close graph for Dynasiate Group Berhad from 4 January to the October 30, 2021. As we can see here, the graph is increasing starting 8 February to the 1st March before we can see a downward to April until early May, but back increasing but slightly in the mid-May. Besides, we can see the continuous decline to the late May until the mid-June in very unsatisfactory fluctuating situation, and this continue until the end of the October. Based on the above situation, 13 January and uptrend with a high bar following the next week as the downtrend as bar is lower than the previous week. Above is the OHIC graph for resin touch Berhad. As we can see, there is in January, they started with lower expectation before slightly increasing to the end of the January. Between February until the late July, we can see their unstable pattern where market fluctuation occur but become a high open when entering the month of August. Starting this month, we can see a more stable pattern as there has an increasing pattern starting in the middle of the September until the end of the October.
Next, we move to the share price analysis for BSL Corporation Berhad. Based on the open high low close graph for BSL Corporation Berhad from 4 January to 30 October 2021, we can see that on the early month of January, the graph shows early stable and positive. Then, at the beginning of February, the open high low close graph of this company shows a slightly decrease until the month of March. Furthermore, we can see the graph is continuously positive and more stable at the month of May until August. Lastly, the graph shows the positive line starting September until the end of October. Based on the above situation, starting January until the end of the month of October, the trend line of this graph is more positive. Now, we move to the share price analysis for Jade Marvel Group Berhad. The graph above shows the open high low close graph for Jade Marvel Group Berhad on 10th month of period starting January until October 2021. It can be seen that on early January the graph line was flat until the end of the month. Then the graph shows it was increased dramatically on the period of March until early month of May. However, starting on the month of June, the open high low close graph line shows that growth slowed down noticeably until the early period of August. Lastly, the graph shows positive and stable lines starting September until the end of October.
Today I would like to talk about the share price analysis of Ajia Berhad. In the open high low close graph of Ajia Berhad, the graph shows that from January to April, there are slightly fluctuation occur. However, the graph starts rising in early of April and reaching its peak in May. As we can see, the graph starting to show a significant drop starting from June until August. The graph shows the occurrence of instability until October and continues showing positive line from early of October onwards. Next is the open high low close of ATTA Global Group Berhad. The graph clearly shown that starting on January, the graph line was slightly increased and decreased in the first 2 months of the year. In the early of February, the graph line shows an increasing trend until the end of April. The graph then showed a dramatically increase in May and keep declining until July. The graph keep showing the unstable trend line from August until the end of October.
From the graph shown, the weekly open high-low close prepared by AYS Venture Berhad were consistent until March, which the prices were increased drastically and starting to decline on April. However, the figures were a bit inconsistent until July and relatively stable from August to September, which caused by the momentum within the company production. In addition, the trend radically escalated from September until the end of October. The graph of open high-low close of Mustil Berhad during early to late January, the numbers slowly declined and started to climb from February until March. The figures were uniform and slightly increased until May. Nevertheless, on the end of May, the trend had a sudden growth and continued decline till September. However, on early September, there were a bit growth and keep decreasing on early October, although open high-low close rose on the middle of October but decreased afterward.
The graph above shows the beta analysis for the dynastic Berhad, and here we can see at the beginning of the January where the point position is below than 1.0, and this indicates that the stock moved less than the market. And this situation is continued until the February, despite an increase from the last month, but the beta position is still at the negative level. In early February, during the MCO 2.0 that has been announced by the government, we can see the highest stock market available. It shows that the market price is at the highest vitality than the market, meaning there is more high risk involved. This situation continues until March, as we can see the highest point ever in this graph, which is above the 1.0, and the investor might facing a risk as high stock market vitality happen above 1.0, which means super risk but has a very great potential of the high return, but plunged rapidly in April and again in negative amount when reaching month of the May. And in June, we can see the best situation of the company. The company C, and the value of its beta is 0.0. The less volatile than the market, the less risky, and rapidly the occurrence of the situation fluctuate between July and October. It's different situation when we go back in January as the lower from the negative 1.0, the lower risk but the more lower return potential to the investor. The data show declining due to MCO 3.0 again has been announced by the government starting April until June, so the risk might be less occur due the slow manufacturing in this company. However, due to some tragedy that has been happened in the month of the August, such as Mount Jurai flood, we can see there is some improvement in building material, as some people need to rebuild their home and many more. And next we go to the syntax Berhad beta analysis graph, and here we can see that the beginning of the graph, which is January, we can see a very large beta value which is above than 1.0, which is it will lead to a very high risk but a very lucrative expectation in return. However, we can see a very significant declining toward March when it passed the negative level of the 1.0 until April. This is due to the government announced the MCO 2.0 stem from the COVID-19 starting middle of the January, which is resulting the drastically declining in the stock market. In June, after the government has been loosened some of the restriction, there's a very significant increase as passes the normal level of 1.0, which is result a big stock market followed by the high risk but a high potential return. And in August, we can see the best value of the analysis. This is not more than 1.0, meaning in between 1.0 and 0 that the market activity are strongly correlated with the price. This also shows that very small or the systematic risk involved. However, again, the government announced total lockdown or MCO 3.0 in the middle of the June, resulting declining in the stock market until the month of the August, where we can see the value seem stable again, but showing a very significant fall in value in September, resulted that security is less volatile in the market. They tend to move slowly that the market that than the actual market. Sorry, due to gradual opening of the industrial sector since September, showing a better value, even is still under the value 1.0.
Now we move to the beta analysis for BSL Corporation Berhad. The graph above shows the beta analysis data for BSL Corporation Berhad on the period of 10th month starting January until October 2021. Based on my analysis, it can be seen that on the beginning of January, where the position positive point, that is at 24.6919, and it is greater than 1 level. This indicates the price of security is theoretically more volatile than the market. However, the graph shows a descending line at the point of 1.5 and still can be indicated greater than 1. We can analyze that when the point is greater than 1, this indicates that adding the stock to a portfolio will increase the risk. On the other hand, it may also increase its expected return. Moreover, on the graph shows a fluctuated line on early March until June, but still acceptable because of the line is not at a negative beta value. On the month of June, the graph shows a less than 1 beta value at the point of 0.175. This type of beta value means that the security is theoretically less volatile than the market. We can analyze that this type of beta is less risky than the time that the same portfolio without the stock. Then, at the month of July and September shows a negative value of beta. This means that the stock is inversely correlated to the market benchmark. This stock would be thought of as an opposite benchmark trend. Lastly, the value of beta started to be positive again on the month of October at the point of 3.46. Next, we move to beta analysis for Jade Marvel Group Berhad. The graph above shows the beta analysis for Jade Marvel Group Berhad starting January until October 2021. Based on my analysis, we can see that the graph above shows a beta value for this month is 2.098. For the beginning of the month, value beta is quite stable and positive value. This value is greater than 1 and it may suggest that the share is more volatile than the broader market. Then, the beta value for the next month starting to decline at the negative value of beta at the point of negative 7.19. This value indicates a share with lower volatility than the stock is inversely correlated to the market benchmark. Then, on the month of March, the value of beta was 0.55 and it indicated less volatile than the market and tend to move more slowly than the market average. However, the beta value started to begin positive at the month of April until June. This positive value of beta may indicate with high risk portfolio and may expected highly return. Lastly, the graph line started to fluctuate at the month of July until the end of October. Thus, we can see the graph is more improved at the end of the month because of the last value of the beta was on positive side. So it can be acceptable for investor using beta to evaluate a stock, also evaluate it from other perspective.
Next, I would like to talk about the beta analysis of Aja Berhad. The value beta on January for Aja Berhad is 0.052. This may suggest that the security is theoretically less volatile than the market. In February, the graph showed that the decline of the beta value to negative 1.055. The beta of negative 1.0 is defined as the stock is inversely correlated to the market benchmark. Consider this stock as the polar opposite, mirror image of the benchmark trend. The graph keeps showing the fluctuation in the following month of March and April. However, the graph showing the significantly increase in month of May and June. The beta value of those months are greater than 1, which means that its price activity is highly correlated with the market activity. Next is the beta analysis of ATTA Global Group Berhad. In the January, the beta value of the month is 6.611, which is the beta value is greater than 1. This indicates that its market price is highly correlated with those of the market. A stock beta with a beta of 1.0 carries a high level of systematic risk. The beta values decline from January to March. The beta value of March is less than 1 at the point of 0.580. The beta value which is less than 1 are indicated as it tends to be less volatile than the market. Then the beta value of net following month is starting to decline at negative value of negative 2.306. The value indicated as a share with lower volatility and the stock is inversely correlated to the market benchmark. The graph then shows that the value of beta is more unstable and slightly fluctuated starting from May to October.
From the chart shown, the beta results in January were negative, which correlated with the return of the market and lower market returns. Plus, the beta on February increased to 5.37706, which companies were more risky compared to the market. The beta results on March started to decrease until April, which reached negative, that promotes lower market return. However, the pattern was drastically rose to 17.18635, which is the peak of the trend. The AYS Ventures Berhad market were very volatile and unhealthy. They are risky but provide higher return. The company's beta continuously decreased from June till July, which offered more stable than previous month. Nonetheless, the figure keeps soaring on August, that was over 1, and excessively declined on September. Lastly, the trend started to increase on October to 3.906354, which quite high compared to ideal beta in the market. As the graph shown, the beta figure on January was quite ideal, which Masti Berhad actually followed the market trend, but then slightly decreased on February, whereby promotes lower return. Anyhow, they managed to rise to 1.070433, that was more secure, and sudden decrease on April to negative 10.4231. The next month of the trend radically rose to 20.72129, which also the highest peak of on the whole 10 month of 2021. Nevertheless, the pattern was declining till September and provide more secure than before. Last but not least, on October, the trend increased to 6.140987, whereby promotes better stability in the market.
And now I'm showing you the standard deviation analysis for Danish Group Berhad. Firstly, we can see all the value in this analysis recorded under the 1.0 value, which is we can consider that this data is very low. And first, we can look at the start from the January. There has been an increase into the February and matched at the month of the March. However, the declining start in the month of the April until the June before slightly up to the July. Therefore, we can see the uptrend from the August to the month of the October. If the standard deviation is lower than the standard deviation will be bigger than the variance. Now we look at the Touch-Berhad standard deviation analysis, and we can see the value is better than the Berhad, but we can see it is still under the 1.0 value. Based on the analysis that I can see, the declining from January to April show that great loss until they regain back in June. However, the declining trend is happened in July, recorded the lowest value which is 0.0206, before increasing to the highest value at the August, which is 0.0962. The unexpected happened in January to April and June to July might caused by the MCO 2.0 and 3.0 that has been announced by the government for this country to prevent the COVID-19 pandemic.
Next, we move to the standard deviation for BSL Corporation Berhad. So, the graph above shows the standard deviation analysis for BSL Corporation Berhad starting January until October 2021. Based on my analysis, we can see that the graph above shows a standard deviation value for January is 0.2251. This month, standard deviation is less than 1, indicating a low value. If the standard deviation is less than 1, it will be greater than the variance. The standard deviation essentially informs us how to spread the data. Same goes to February. The value for the month is 0.0987, below than 1. The graph shows the line has been fluctuated from March until August. Lastly, the graph shows the positive line from August to September and begin to decrease on October. Now we move to the standard deviation for Jade Marvel Group Berhad. Based on the standard deviation graph for Jade Marvel Group Berhad above, from 4 January to 30 October 2021, we can see that on the early month of January, the graph shows early positive value but below than 1, that is 0.0356. As we can see in the graph above, on the month of January until October, the value of the standard deviation was below than 1. This value is indicated as low. If the standard deviation is lower than 1, as in the graph, the standard deviation will be bigger than the variance.
Next is the standard deviation graph of Aja Berhad. The graph shows that the value of standard deviation in January is 0.0351. The graph then starting to decline from January until March and shift up significantly in April and May. The graph is reaching its peak in May with a point of 0.0825. However, the graph is starting to decline again in early of June until October. The standard deviation of Aja Berhad in the duration of January to October are basically lower than 1, which means that the standard deviation will be bigger than the variance. Next is the standard deviation of ATTA Global Group Berhad. In the early of January to February, the graph shows a slightly increase in the value of standard deviation of ATTA Global Group Berhad. The graph then shows the increasing trend in March and April. The graph reached its peak in August. with standard deviation value of 0.084. However, the standard deviation value from January to October are basically lower than 1. The low standard deviation indicates that the data are clustered around the mean.
From the figures shown above, the standard deviation of AYS Ventures Berhad were consistent throughout 10 months of 2021, which also not over 1. Therefore, the company were not in high risk within the market. The trend of standard deviation of January was 0.067905 and rose on February by 0.251868. Then started to decrease on March to 0.075997 and increased to 0.144258 on April. On May, the pattern moderately increased by 0.147148, and for the next 2 months were basically not much changes. However, the trend rose on August by 0.206939, but continuously declined on September and October. The standard deviation of Masih Berhad on January was 0.050951 and rose on February by 0.13438. Nonetheless, the trend subsequently dropped until April by negative 0.14073, which more reliable but lower return from the market. On May, the figure severely increased and the highest trend for the whole 10 months. Plus, the pattern started to decrease on June and consistent for 4 months. The figure rose on October by 0.087337.
And now I will show you the covariance analysis for the dynamic global health. Starting in the July, the value is negative, but we can see the increasing to the February. However, in the March, we set the record for the highest value between this 10-month analysis, which is 0.1260%. As the covariance for this month is positive, it is indicate that the pair value of both variables tend to increase together. A positive covariance means that asset price are moving in the same general direction, and negative means that asset price are moving in opposite direction. Declining in April until June, which recorded negative value, will get the uptrend in the July. Above is the covariance analysis for the Touch Berhad from the January to October this year. And firstly, we can see that it has a better trend as more positive value indicate in this analysis. Even though the great declining we can see in February to March, but it was saved by the highly increasement at April until the June, recorded the highest value in this time period. Although there was declining trend toward the September, we can see that has been increasing to October. From the September to October, we can see the increasement. By that, we can conclude that this company has a better analysis this year, even facing the MCO 2.0 and 3.0, and facing the very unstable political situation in this country.
Next, on this slide shows the covariance for BSL Corporation Berhad. So, based on the covariance graph for BSL Corporation Berhad from 4 January to 30 October 2021, we can see that on the early month of January, the graph shows early stable and positive at the value of 0.1238%. Then, at the beginning of February, the value of covariance seems increased dramatically. This month's covariance is positive, indicating that the period value for both variables tend to rise together. A positive covariance indicates that the asset price are trending in the same general direction. Then, at the month of March, the value started to decrease continuously until September. The covariance value on September was negative 0.0992%. Therefore, this can be analyzed negative value means the asset price are moving in opposite direction. Now, the slide above shows the covariance for Jade Marvel Group Berhad. On the graph above shows the covariance analysis for Jade Marvel Group Berhad starting January until October 2021. Based on my analysis, we can see that the graph above shows the covariance value for January is started at positive value at 0.0105%. As this month is positive number, it indicates that the two variables tend to move together and with the same sign. However, the graph seems to be decreased at the month of February at the negative side, that is negative 0.082%. This can be measured that a negative covariance indicates that the two variables tend to move in the opposite direction. Then the graph began to increase from March until June. The covariance value for June is the highest value for the period from January until October at the value 0.0969%. Lastly, the graph seems fluctuated from July until October.
Next is covariance analysis of Aja Berhad. In January, the covariance analysis of Aja Berhad is 0.0003%, which is this month's positive covariance, shows that the pair value of both variables are increasing in parallel, which suggests that both variables are increasing together. Asset price move in the same general direction when the covariance is positive. However, in February, the graph tends to show a decline to negative 0.0086%, which means that the asset price moved in the opposite direction. The highest covariance value occurred in August with a value of 0.618%. Next is the covariance analysis for ATTA Global Group Berhad. According to the covariance analysis graph of ATTA Global Group Berhad, we can clearly see that in the early of January, the graph starting to decline until April. However, the graph shows a significant increase from April to May with the covariance values of 0.0201%. The graph shows that the rapid decline in July to August with covariance value of negative 0.0457% in August. The covariance of August indicates that price move in the opposite direction when the covariance is negative. The graph then remained increased from September to October.
Based on the covariance graph prepared by AYS Ventures Berhad, the percentage was negative 0.01% on January and moderately inclined to 0.04% on February. Then the figure decreased in April by negative 0.04%, although the covariance drastically increased by 0.07% on next month. The trend on June was 0% and rather inclined by 0.01%. However, in August, the percentage increased by 0.29%, which is the peak for the whole 10 month, and drastically increased on September but inclined in October by 0.07%. From the graph shown, the covariance of Master Berhad on January was 0.044% but somewhat declined to negative 0.0038% on the following month, although on March was 0.0365%, whereby the second highest peak for the whole graph. The pattern started to decline on June and slightly increased on July by 0.0245%. For the upcoming month, the percentage constantly decreased until September but sudden rose in October to 0.1021%. Industry risk analysis was performed by an investor to show the risk investor need to face when investing in a specific industry. The reason behind this analysis is some companies in same industry tends to link their stock performance with a risk with the risk involved in that industry. Performing industry analysis involves the real performance of real world to watch some significant changes in stock market trends. However, the industry risk analysis might have some impact in a few sectors such as government policy, economic, social and environmental impact.
Next is the industry risk analysis in the aspect of policy government impact. The government policy can influence interest rates, and a rise in interest rates will raise the borrowing cost. Higher interest rate will result in lower consumer spending, while lower interest rate will encourage investment as the business to improve the output levels. The rate of interest is determined by the government's fiscal policies. When interest rate rise, investment declines as people prefer to deposit money in banks and earn fixed interest rather than taking the risk of investing. If interest rates are too high, business owners will avoid borrowing from banks, resulting in decline in investment. When interest rates are low, people invest more money than they deposit, and entrepreneurs will borrow and invest. Thus, both GDP and economic activity will increase.
Economics is a social science regarding the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services, which specifically explain how individuals, businesses, governments to make better choices in allocating resources. Therefore, microeconomics and macroeconomics involve due to the existence of demand and supply. Economic impact can be positive or negative outcome that may affect certain businesses, which relates various situations. However, there are a lot of risks that a company need to face, for instance, market fluctuation, natural disaster, competition, financings, and etc. Market fluctuation are caused by few factors which economic cycle in the country and shift in demand of end customers. This may lead due to share price go up and down, which also affected from technology changes, natural disaster, the publication of economic indicators, and more. Therefore, whenever there are market downturns, the product demand decline and increase in production. Thus, the company had to lower their price of the products and reduce the group sale, lower returns in gross margin, which they unable to maximize the profits. Next, natural disaster, also part of economic risk and building material and metal analysis. For example, global pandemic virus COVID-19 that became a toll towards most of the affected countries. Some industries are unable to operate their businesses due to movement control order (MCO). Thus, the economic cycle was in crisis due to decline in demand and unable to maximize the productions. Plus, the expenses within the businesses were still ongoing while they were unable to generate income. Therefore, they possibly need to face huge amount of debts, which also affect their cash flow. In addition, the recent catastrophe of flood that affect Selangor region may lead to damage of building materials and metals. Hence, they need to produce more products and unable to recover the loss of damaged materials. Finally, competition within the market also can be part of the risk, which consumer relatively will demanding on lower price of the goods. Demands for production also increase, so does the supplies. Hence, the economic cycle will expand and increase gross domestic product (GDP), interest rate, total employment, and consumer spending, whereby boost the company's profit. That being the case, the company needed to survey the market price of the products within the competitor, so they are able to maximize their profits.
Now we're going to the social impact. Social impact is defined as the consequence on human population in any society or any independently that develop on how the people live, how the people work, and how people play, interact with each other, organize what they want, organize what they need and demand, and endorse the member of the society. The social impact incorporate with the development of the people direction of life, perception, and their neighborhood. The social impact on the industry is on the worldwide scale. societal and environment concerns are becoming very increasing important. The problem is unique to the company as the target market and the net project in the future. An investor sometimes they tend to look on how company can see a future based on their today's social consequence. Besides, the stakeholder may have interest in the social issue and additional traditional stakeholders such as shareholder, employee, consumers, supplier. The industry now engage with many environmental organizations, human rights organizations, student college, and many more. But in this year, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the world has been suffer a very enormous fear, which is the fear has been increasing between the society. This situation might changing the people social as they become more careful in their social life, and they also bringing the high impact of the market share price that has been show the very high declining in the market price. And sometimes people tend to sell their stock so so they can save their money to survive their life rather than making an investment. However, some people see this lower price as the chain for them to making a more investment to the company because of the lower price. Furthermore, this pandemic situation may reach the social impact in some companies because the company might have filed bankruptcy because they cannot no longer pay the employee and many more. And this will be the lowest social lifestyle and security as people need to survive without any proper income.
Now we move to the risk analysis for environment impact include global and local factor. An environmental effect is described as any effect to the environment, whether negative or positive, caused by the operation, good or services of a facility. In the other word, it is the impact of human activity on the environment. For instance, when the volatile organic compounds are released into the environment, the result is pollution in the form of haze, which is bad in this situation. It may also go to the opposite way, with a person pick up rubbish having a good positive influence on the surrounding environment. Furthermore, the industry risk term of environmental impact may be the global climate that change may lead to the collapse of iceberg and the destruction of biodiversity for creatures that rely on them. Climate change is a significant energy security concern not only because direct flooding and environmental catastrophes can harm power station and transmission system, but also because it has a drastic impact on food production, health, and environment refuges, all of which can lower Asian nation revenue bases and add to government debt, complicating effort to make sound energy policy. Moreover, the current issue that impact the industry in the pandemic COVID-19 that has turned into the global crisis, evolving the high-speed scale. This crisis affect every business, including engineering and construction. Engineering and construction firms must respond quickly to maintain the integrity of their operation and protect their employees. It also affects which varies by industry has been enormous in the building industry. Because construction is subject to economic cycle, construction company and employee are particularly exposed to the pandemic, sharp drop in the economic activity. On the plus side, because of its capacity to produce employment, building has a high potential to boost recovery. Recovery effort in turn can aid the sector transition to sustainability and digitalization. Governments, employers and labour group and other sector stakeholders are thus responding quickly due to the COVID-19 pandemic, with a slew of initiatives aimed at bolstering the construction industry. Prior to the pandemic, the construction sector employed around 7.7% of the worldwide workforce, with forecast for 2020 predicting that it would generate 13.4% of global GDP. However, in the context of the present crisis, declining revenue and growing project delivery issues have caused the industry to decline in the most countries, with a corresponding negative impact on workforce measures. Construction sector lockdown have varied greatly by region and project type.
This is the end of our presentation. Thank you for watching.